So this is our brand new X15 CM2350 that runs great. All the operators like it, and it's at a job with a 1921 fault code active, and the only way to get rid of those, if you've watched my earlier videos on after treatment, is you have to do an hour to an hour and a half stationary regen. I say an hour to an hour and a half because you have to start it and you have to let it finish, and it decides how long that's going to be. And typical times are 40 minutes to an hour and 40 minutes. So hour and a half is what it takes. So the machine's going to be out of service for that long anyway while that happens. But before we do that, we don't want to do that and then a couple days later we're right back there again. We got to figure out what happened and why it happened. So at this point, I want you to stop the video. Imagine you're the guy that the mechanic calling, and you've got to tell them what to do. You've seen what I saw with the fault codes and the soot load. And what would be your plan of action? When you're done, restart the video. Well, what I wanted to do is see what was going on, how he was operating it. So I had him start a data log all parameters, since we did have the operator there and he was the operator that was using the machine off and on. And I said, I want you to start it up like you do in the morning and do what you would normally do, and I want you to do some lifts. And he wasn't actually lifting anything, but on that machine you can do boom up, scope out. You can do some things that simulate pretty good hydraulic load, the type we might see, close to what we might see while they're actually using the machine. So that's what he did, and I'm going to show you in the next couple slides the logs. So let's take a look at those. Okay, so here we are. He started the machine up. We're at the low speed idle governor state. I cut a number of rows off of this so he wouldn't just have to look at the same thing. So we start at the low governor state, and then he turns on the PTO switch up in the upper. So now the PTO is kicked in, the hydraulic pump is running, and he is in the upper. Notice that the engine's idling at 700 RPM in the first line, column 1. And once he puts the PTO on, it bumps itself up to about 750. And that's where it was idling, getting ready to work. Notice that percent of load is about 4%. And that's not a lot of load on the engine, especially not on an ISX. And this is an ISX, but they call it an X15. So it's sitting there running. The engine's net torque that it's putting out is about 50 foot-pounds, give or take. We've got barely any intake boost, under 2 inches. And the remote accelerator pedal up in the crane is what's going to be used to throttle it up. I've got a calculated exhaust gas temperature. That's another indication of how hard the engine's working that I use to determine that. I can determine it in this case because we are not under heavy load, we're light load. So I just want to see what kind of exhaust calculated temperatures there are. And then I had them log in column, the last 2, 3, and 4 there, exhaust mass flow rate and volumetric flow rate. And you can see in pounds per minute, we're at about 5 at idle and then 6.5 or so when we're in PTO mode and got a little more load on it, okay? And so now in this next snapshot, look at your engine speed in column 1. You see it runs up to about 14 or 1500. And he is stepping on the throttle and he's raising the RPM so that he can do some work with the hydraulics. And his pedal is about halfway down. And we're at about 1400 RPM. And notice the net torque on the engine goes up to about 100 pounds, and then it gets up to about 267 when he starts to work. His boost climbs up to 17, 18 inches of mercury. And our calculated exhaust temperature goes up to about 494, and our exhaust mass flow rate goes up to about 28.1, and that's pounds per minute. Now, volume flow is up around 6 cubic feet a second, okay? That's going to become important later on as we look ahead. Here we're going to take a look at his second pick that I had him do. And again, our intake manifold pressure got up around 17. And we had about 26, 27 pounds per minute of mass flow rate. And we didn't get much over 8 inches or 8 cubic feet per second of volumetric flow rate. And the engine in column 2 is only getting up to about 15 to 16% load. So notice about 4 and 5 lines down where we went from 1,046 back down to 742 to 52. So he dumped his foot off the throttle for a split second. Maybe he changed functions, and then he got back into it. Now remember that the engines run in modes. In this case, he's in the PTO mode. But on the newer engines, there's also software routines that run in the background that can be changed when throttle's changed or RPM's changed or other values like boost and things change. So keep that in mind as we're trying to figure out what went on with this. And this, what you're seeing now, is pretty much what this machine did all day long. It either idled around 750 when in PTO mode, and that was all day. He would warm it up in the morning for 5 minutes at base idle. At the end of the day, he would just pop it out of PTO mode and shut it off, jump out of the cab, and get in his car and drive home. And the truck sat there on outriggers. So that was what its work life was. So think about what you think could have been causing these problems. And remember, the unit was trouble-free till it got to this job. Remember, it'd been here about almost 6 weeks at this job. And when I see you next week, we're going to talk about what happened and why. Thanks for joining me on Engine Shop Joe.